This class is part of the Lessons in Tanya project. More classes available at lessonsintanya.com. Major funding for this Tanya class is provided by the Mettel Corporation. Additional funding is provided by Tanya students like you. Lessons in Tanya. The Tanya of Rabbi Schneur Zalman of Liadi, taught by Rabbi Ben Zion Krasnianski. Tanya's text elucidated by Rabbi Yosef Weinberg.
The last essay, essay 9 of the 5th part of the Tanya. This is a letter, or it was actually written a year before the very first letter of the Holy Letters, the 4th part of the Tanya. And that letter refers to this letter. So this was written in 1787 or 88. And this is what Alter Rebbe instituted for the first time. He instituted the Chalukas Hashas, dividing the study of the whole entire Talmud, annual study and finishing of the whole entire Talmud. This is one of the earliest letters, and he starts out, Torah says that we're obligated to rebuke our fellow Jew, and it says twice, in other words, even if you rebuked once, you can't stop and say, listen, I did my duty. I rebuked, and he's not listening. But the rabbis say, afילו, even פעמים, even 100 times. Not limited to 100. It means many, many times. You have to continue to rebuke until the person slaps you in the face. When he slaps you in the face, then there's no point in rebuking. So Alter Rebbe is saying that this is a letter of rebuke. He's rebuking his Hasidim, but even this rebuke, it's a very loving rebuke. It's not pouring fire and brimstone on his Hasidim. He's like pleading with them and begging with them to take the heart and to have mercy on themselves and to change in a pained voice, in a weak voice. Because after speaking about this so many times and rebuking so many times and not getting any response, this weakens the Alter Rebbe. The Rebbe would always say when he's in his Fabrengen, he said that Dvarim B'Teilim, people make a mistake. People think, Dvarim B'Teilim means you're speaking empty words, speaking nonsense. I'm not saying anything negative, not Lashon Hara, I'm not slandering anyone, I'm not telling lies. But speaking, yenteving, plappeling, pleading, just speaking, dvarim b'teilim. The Rebbe says, no, that's not dvarim b'teilim. Dvarim b'teilim means words that are bottle, that have no meaning, no significance. In other words, the words that you're speaking are very good words, holy words, inspiring words. But if the words have no effect, then the words are empty, the words are bottled, the words are not functioning. They're not doing anything, they're not accomplishing anything. So the Rebbe was saying about himself, if I sit in Fabrengen for hours and I'm speaking and I'm inspiring and cajoling, but there are no results, it's up to the audience to make sure that these words are not bottled. It means it's a nice speech. You gave a nice speech and everyone applauds, and everyone remembers, wow, what a great speech. But there's no effect. There's no impact. Then these words, Dvarim B'Teilim, as holy and as lofty as these words are, the Dvarim B'Teilim. So if Alter Rebbe is rebuking and discussed this many times and made a point, but he has no effect, so it weakens. Alter Rebbe says, I feel weakened because I'm speaking, but I'm not accomplishing anything. So I'm speaking once again, I'm rebuking you once again with a very pained and a very weak voice, because I feel weak because my words are not impacting. My words are having zero impact. It's not connecting. It's not changing any behavior. So what's the point of the words if the words have no effect? The point is not to rebuke. The point is to affect a change of behavior. But if the words remain and just nice words, okay, so I fulfilled my obligation. So if you're doing it just to fulfill your obligation, what do you care? I fulfilled my religious duty. Torah says you have to rebuke. I did it and I feel great. But that's not where rebuke is coming from. The Torah says rebuke your fellow Jew and love your fellow Jew like yourself. Don't hate your fellow Jew. Whereas the rebuke is coming from a loving place. Because why am I rebuking? You know, in America we live in a live, let live society. You want to jump off the bridge, do whatever you want. You want to bang your head against the wall? You want to commit suicide? We'll help you. God forbid. Whatever makes you happy. You want to live as a lifestyle that's self-destructive, it's reckless and dangerous. Whatever makes you happy. Who am I to say? And we confuse that for love. It's the ultimate cruelty. It's enough to give you the goosebumps. Those I couldn't care less about you. Don't bother me. I don't want to be bothered. I'll live my life, my selfish life. You live your selfish life and just do what you want, and I don't care what you do. As long as you don't bother me. And people confuse that with love. It's not love, it's hatred. I really couldn't care less about you. And as long as you don't bother me. If you really love someone, if you truly love someone, then it bothers you. If you see them acting self-destructively, it bothers you. I care about you. You're eating junk food, you're killing yourself. You're living a junk lifestyle, you're killing yourself. What are you doing? I care too much about you just to ignore it and say, it's none of my business. Live and let live. In Sodom and Gomorrah, it was live and let live. But in a holy society, in a godly society, if you really care, if there's real love, a parent cares about their child. The parent doesn't say live and let live. Don't bother me. Some parents live like that. They can't be bothered, so they spoil their kids. And the message to the kids are, I couldn't care less about you, so don't get in the way, and I don't have time for you. I don't have energy for you. To discipline and to rebuke takes a lot of energy. And that's what Alter Rebbe is saying, you're draining me of my energy. I care about you, and therefore I'm going to say it 100 times, and it's draining me, and it's hurting me, and it's taking my kishkas out. But I care too much to be silent. I'm going to continue speaking even though I hardly have a voice left. I barely have the energy left to speak again. How many times can I say this over? It's already 100 times. But I care too much about you. And that's what the Torah commands us. Rebuke even 100 times because you care about your fellow Jew. And if you really love and care about your fellow Jew, even though it's draining to you, because you're speaking and there's no effect, but you will continue to rebuke. Even if you barely have any energy left to speak up. But I can't be silent. Silence is not an option. As the Alter Rebbe continues, I can't contain myself. I can't contain from crying out, even though it's a voice that's pained with weakness, but I just can't because I love you too much and I care too much about you. That's the mitzvah in the Torah. Rebuke even 100 times. It's not limited to 100 times. Because how can I stop? The reason I rebuked you the first time, because I cared about you. So that didn't change. So it's hurting me and it's draining me, but I can't keep quiet. Okay, Barry, you want to start? It is written.
It is written, you shall surely reprove your comrade even 100 times. Add our sages, taking up the hint offered by the repetitive form of the Hebrew verb.
Hocheach, tוכיח, like twice. Reprove, you should reprove.
Therefore, writes the Alter Rebbe, I cannot contain myself and I cannot refrain from crying out yet again in a voice betraying pained weakness. I plead with you out of deep compassion. Have pity on your souls. Take care, be extremely vigilant concerning the study of Torah and service of the heart, which is prayer with proper intent. All should begin the prayers in unison as one, word by word. Not one person here, another elsewhere, one mute and the other idly chatting. May Hashem protect us.
So he's saying that praying with a minyan is that everyone should start together. Everyone should daven together, word for word. Interesting, that's how the Sfardim pray. They say the whole davening out loud, together, word for word, which is really what Alter Rebbe is describing. That's really ideal. You know, when the Rebbe would daven, that's how you would daven. When the Rebbe davened for the Amid, and he had yahrzeit, or the yahrzeit of the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe would say word for word, out loud. And at the end, he would raise his voice on a higher note to finish the psalm and finish the piece. But the whole davening, he said, it wasn't quiet. You can hear. You say it because that's what Alter Rebbe says. It's like you're davening together, not this one there and that one there scattered, but everyone together. And another letter, Alter Rebbe describes a little more in detail. Another letter of the Alter Rebbe that we have, Alter Rebbe describes, because prayer is a time of war. It's like battle. That's the time that you're doing battle against your evil inclination, against your ego nature, against your, your natural self, and you're trying to awaken the godly soul. So in battle, the soldiers go together. They work as a team. It's not each individual is, they form a platoon, they form a unit. That's what davening is. Davening in the community, davening with tzibur means we're going to war, but we're coming together as a team. We're doing battle. It's an inner battle. We're doing battle against our arrogance and our ego and our self-centeredness and self-absorption and rough nature. But it's a battle that I'm not doing alone. I'm doing this battle. It's an inner battle. It's a personal, individual battle, but I'm doing this with a community, with the strength of the community. So we all gather together, we gather around, and we're davening together. Each one gives strength to the other, and collectively there's an energy, of collective energy, that you can't get from as an individual. Only when you have 10 Jews together, you have a collective energy. As we learned earlier in the letter number 23 of the fourth part, the great length. So the Alter Rebbe is saying that this is the way a minyan should look like. Everyone should gather together, say everything word for word, and not, God forbid, people having conversations in the middle of davening. It's the worst. This one is in one end of the room, this one is into himself, and they're quiet, but worse yet, they're having conversations. Some shuls, for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, they ask you which section you want to sit. The stock market, the sports section, the political section, which section you want to talk about during the long prayers. Who do you want to be seated next to? But prayer is not a time, God forbid, to speak. The king is here, you're davening. How could you're standing, you have an audience with the king and you're distracted and the Shekhinah is present, Hashem is present, 10 Jews together in shul, davening, Hashem is present. And it's like you're slapping Hashem in the face. I'm sorry, you're talking to this one and talking about this. The king is here. So he says, God forbid.
The main cause and instigator of this damage comes from those leading us.
So if you want to correct the problem, you have to get to the root cause of the problem. So the Rebbe here blames the problem is the chazan, the leader of the service, the chazan.
That office is abandoned to whoever wishes to stride forth and snatch the honor, or because, not even if one desires it, so that ultimately the prayer is led by someone inappropriate to the...
It's interesting. It's always the person who's least appropriate who offers to daven, who offers the service. It's the person who's least appropriate who's always running up front, pushing themselves for the honor. It's the person who's least appropriate many times who runs for office, running for the honor, pushing himself to be the first one. And
thinking more in terms of Rosh Hashanah?
No, every day. Every day. This is the middle of the year. Every day, the morning davening, especially the morning davening, every day. And he says, whoever wants to rush and who grabs Ephrasi is like honor, that honored position. It's amazing. Who's the one who sings the loudest in the shul? It's usually the one who's tone deaf. And they insist on singing the loudest and trying to lead the singing. And they can't hold a tune to save them. It's just human nature. It wasn't funny. It's so sad, but it's very funny. People are always rushing to the front. The people should really be sitting in the back. People who sing the loudest shouldn't be singing at all. And people who run to the chazan, run to the amir, that people are completely... Because to be a chazan, the chazan is a representative of the community. So firstly, it has to be someone who the community likes. There's a whole discussion. If there's an halacha, what if one person of the community congregation says, I don't like this chazan? The chazan is a representative of the community. So he says, you don't represent me. I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel you represent me, and I don't... Does it have to be unanimous? So it has to be someone who's beloved by the community. It has to be a leader, a chazan who inspires, has a beautiful voice. The Talmud says, the chazan has to have someone who has a beautiful voice. The chazan has to be a little distinguished. The chazan has to be someone who the community looks up to. We want you to be our shliach tzibur. We want you to be our representative. You are a representative to Hashem. Who are you sending to the king? Someone who's honorable, someone who you feel could represent you because they say the words of davening so beautifully, so eloquently, so heartfelt, so sincere. So it all depends on the leader, on the chazan. He sets the tone for the whole shul. So no one wants to go to the chazan. No one wants to go to the amir. The people who should go don't want to go. The people who want to go shouldn't go, and they end up going. So they end up being the chazan. And it's a disaster. No one wants to daven with them. No one wants to say word for word with them. No, they can't gather the people, and they can't inspire the people. So this destroys the whole minyan. This destroys the whole atmosphere of the minyan. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe is not giving advice. For this reason, continue.
For this reason, this is the counsel offered and a regulation established as a law not to be violated further, heaven forbid. That is, choose fixed individuals fit for this office of leading the prayers by lot or by consent of the majority of the worshipers.
Okay, so firstly, if no one wants to go, the people who should go don't want to go. They're not looking for the honor. They're running away from the honor. They don't need it. Not interested. They would rather daven alone and be absorbed in their own personal davening. Those are the ones that need to daven. So if no one wants to go, you make a lot. Everyone has a certain day. This is your responsibility. And Alter Rebbe writes in that letter. And that he's going to write later on. And that person, the day that's his day, he has to make it his responsibility to gather the minyan and inspire. It should be a beautiful davening. Because we all know the difference between a good davening, an inspired davening, a beautiful, uplifting davening, or if it's a nebuch. So it's up to that person. Or it should be someone who the majority, you're never going to get unanimous. To get every Jew to agree, it's almost unheard of. If you get two Jews to agree, that's why the Torah says you can believe two witnesses, because if you get two Jews to agree, you know they're telling the truth. Or if you see two people agreeing, two Jews agreeing, you know they're getting married. Otherwise it doesn't happen. So you can't expect unanimous, but at least the majority. And the majority of the congregation. It's beloved by the majority. And they all agree and they set that this person will be the chazan. So it has to be someone who the majority agrees that they want them as their representative, and who indeed is fit for office.
These shall be men who pray word by word at a moderate pace allowed, neither overly prolonging the prayers, nor racing intemperately, God forbid.
So you can't have the two extremes. Mm-hmm. When you daven privately and alone, like it says Rabbi Akiva, when he davened alone, he would daven with great intensity. He was a Kabbalist. He was one of the four who entered into the Pardes. The only one who walked out intact. So when he davened alone, he would like jump from one end of the shul to the other end of the shul. It was a whole experience. But when you daven for the Amid and you daven for the community, for the congregation, you represent the community, you have to take the middle road. Can't be too quick. It has to be word for word, slow pace, nice pace, but also can't be too slow. I mean, then you're going to lose the whole congregation. So it has to be a middle pace, nicely paced, word for word. And that's a big attraction why people like our minyan, the koil in the morning, is because, I don't know if it's the only synagogue in the community, maybe the Sephardim have it, but it's a nice pace, not too slow, not too fast, word for word. It's a davening. You're not racing through the davening, it's not a bullet train, it's not a race off to the races, see who can finish before they start. Mm-hmm. It's a davening, word for word, it's nice and slow, so it can't be too slow and it can't be too fast.
Theirs is the duty to lead the prayers, each on his day as determined. He shall assemble close around him all those who pray audibly, at least neither whispering nor rushing, God forbid.
It's not that it's so quiet, it shouldn't be like a library. It's so hushed and so quiet. You can't even tell that everyone is davening. It shouldn't be in a loud voice either. The Baal Shem Tov says when a person davens, you should even your shouting should be in a gentle voice. You're shouting inwardly. You're on fire. But externally, outwardly, it should be hushed. It shouldn't be like you're yelling and screaming at the top of your lungs. It should be you're davening. So internally, you're on fire. And you're bubbling, and you're bursting, and you're excited. But you have to express it in a very dignified and beautiful way, in a very channeled way. So externally, you're saying the words. You can hear the words. But it's not loud, yelling and screeching. Because that's also very superficial. The spontaneity or the spontaneous emotions. Davening is not jazz. You have spontaneous emotions and you burst out. Davening is real. It has to be very internal, very genuine. A genuine emotion doesn't express itself through spontaneous shouting and yelling and jumping. Something stirring in your soul, you express it. And you can hear the words. It's not silent, but it's not yelling either. But every word is heartfelt. And every word sears into your soul and comes from your inner depth. So that's what he says. It should be not silent, not yelling, and not rushing. It should be nice, nicely paced.
This is amplified in age-old communal regulations in many towns. I come now, writes the Alter Rebbe, to renew them, to strengthen and invigorate them, never again to be weakened, God forbid.
Alter Rebbe is saying, I'm not innovating. I'm not creating anything new. These are ancient, age-old communal regulations which the towns saw fit. And I'm just coming to renew them, to bring them back. The same reason they made them then, now we need them even more. So I'm just coming to strengthen them, and this should remain. It shouldn't be like the enactments of old that didn't last. The proof is that I still have to write this letter. And I'm trying to make an enactment that will last forever and ever. But once you get it and you understand the importance of davening, and davening, we're not talking about those individuals who daven for hours, who daven alone, privately, who would start before the minyan, sit through the whole minyan and answer the amens and hear the baruch and the kedusha and hear the whole minyan, and then we'll continue to daven for hours and hours and hours. Alter Rebbe is talking about the majority that daven with a minyan. But this minyan should be a real davening. As we learned in the first letter of the Igeres HaKodesh, of the holy letters, the davening Alter Rebbe should take an hour. Till after Shemoneh Esrei, it'll take an hour. Alter Rebbe is davening himself. He practiced what he preached. His davening, the whole davening, I think, would take an hour and a half. But davening, word for word, and davening slowly. And there in the letter we learned, Alter Rebbe says, he suggested that only those who, like the kollel rabbis, who are learning all day, or malamdim, teachers who are not rushing to work, they should be the only ones who should be allowed to daven. Like we learned in the last essay, not those who are rushing, businessmen are rushing to work and they have to get back to the business. Those who can daven nice and slow, not too fast, not too slow, not too loud, not too quiet, but word for word, together. And the chazan should be the one responsible to be in charge of making sure this happens. Gathering the 10 people with him. Together with him, there should be 10 people, everyone together, start davening together, word for word. And they should daven. And they would get strength from it. This is what davening with a minyan is all about. It's that community, congregation, that unit that gives you the strength to wage this battle and to win this battle, to triumph in this battle, in this internal battle. And here the Alter Rebbe adds, in parentheses, 2 words, gewalt, gewalt, in Yiddish. And the whole entire Tanya, this is the only time we find Yiddish in the 5 books of the Tanya. We've been studying this for 14 years. And it's the first time Alter Rebbe, gewalt, gewalt means oi, oi, oi. Gewalt, gewalt. When something hurts you, when you're in pain, out goes the fancy language, the eloquent language, and you just cry in Mameloshen, in Yiddish, in your language. So the Alter Rebbe is in such pain here that he's saying, Gewalt, Gewalt. I don't know, what more can I do to impress upon you the importance of what I'm writing here? It's not just another detail, another directive. This is the core, the essence of everything. What more can I press upon you how important this is, how vital, how critical? They tell a story, these Jewish immigrants send their daughter to this French school. They have this French school, fancy French school right here around the corner. And then the daughter grows up and gets married. And she's having a first baby. So she calls her obstetrician and they go to the hospital. And the mother is there in the hallway speaking to the doctor. And the daughter yells out in a beautiful, eloquent French, "Doctor, come." I don't know French, I'm not going to. "Come, I'm having the baby." The doctor ignores her, continues speaking to the mother. The mother says, "Why don't you go to my daughter? She's yelling." So, "No, don't worry, not yet. Half hour later, in a higher voice, in a beautiful, eloquent French, "Doctor, please come." Ignores her. Half hour later, she hears a yell, "Gewalt!" The doctor starts running. Now the baby is coming. As long as you're speaking fancy, sophisticated, intellectual, it's gehackt and scheinig. It's nothing. When it's a cry from your kishkis, it's a cry from your gut. Gewalt, gewalt. It's funny, there's a famous picture when Jimmy Carter, after Camp David, he went to the Knesset to convince the Knesset to vote for it, because there was tremendous opposition. And he's sitting in the Knesset, closing his ears and cringing, because all parliaments are the English parliament gets pretty wild also. It's not like the American Congress. Everything is very sedated and very there. It's like, but the Israeli Knesset puts them all to shame. And this was in the 70s. So you had people who still from the old country. So forget about the Hebrew. They started yelling at each other. The Yiddish came out, the Russian, the Yiddish started cursing each other, yelling at each other. You know, it's when something bothers you, something hurts, you express it very raw. It's very raw. It's very unsophisticated. Alter Rebbe can't contain himself. And he writes, Gewalt, Gewalt. And he's still shouting, Gewalt, Gewalt. Twice, Gewalt, Gewalt. Oy, oy, oy. What's it going to take, he says, to wake us up? To what's at stake here? Can I continue?
How long will this be an obstacle for us? How long will we be burdened by praying without proper intent? Have we not sufficient reproofs and troubles that have overtaken us? May God protect and console us with redoubled support and purify our hearts to serve Him in truth. Strengthen and fortify your hearts, all who hope in God.
So Alter Rebbe says that it's not enough, all the tzaras that the Jewish people are going through. We're in exile for so long, that time, 1700 years in exile, and the tzaras don't let up, it's relentless. He says, Alter Rebbe is blaming it all because we're not praying properly. We're not praying with the proper intent. And that's the cause, the source of all Yiddish tzaras, physical tzaras. Very strong statement. So you gewalt, not only have Rahmanas, have mercy on your soul, but have mercy on your bodies and your physical well-being, on the Jew. All the tzaras that the Jewish people are suffering, it's only because we're not praying properly. I forget which two Rebbes, two great Hasidic masters were having a discussion why the Jewish people are suffering so terribly, pogroms and poverty, and just in Eastern Europe it was miserable. Physically they were suffering. So one said, he said it's because all the business they were doing, many of them were innkeepers, and they had all these shiksas coming in, and there was a lot of testing the boundaries of modesty. And that's what's causing all these terrible, terrible tzaras. Because it was a given, a granted. For a Jew, anything that happens to us physically is just a symptom of what's happening to us spiritually. If we're morally robust, and we're spiritually robust, and we're Jewishly robust, and we're godly and wholesome, it translates into physical health, into financial health, and well-being. There's no divide, there's no disconnect between. This is clearly in the Torah. You follow my laws, you will be successful, you will be blessed. So for a Jew, everything is not only psychosomatic, spiritual somatic, Jewish somatic. Everything that's spiritual and godly and Jewish affects us physically. So if you want to fix a problem, you have to go to the root cause. So of course, if you have a financial difficulty, you have to speak to your financial advisor. If you have a medical difficulty, you have to speak to a doctor. But first and foremost, we have to realize that everything has a spiritual cause. So you have to strengthen yourself Jewishly and spiritually, and that will address the root cause. So they were discussing, what is the root cause? Why are Jews suffering so terribly in Eastern Europe? So one rabbi said, it's because of this intermingling and the men and the women, and in a very unhealthy situations, morally challenging. And the other rabbi said, it's because Jews speak in shul. They're speaking during davening. So they decided, no, let's open a chumash, and we'll see what the Torah says. So they opened the chumash, and they opened to Genesis, Bereshis, Parshas Vayishlach. When Shimon and Levi killed out the whole city of Shechem, because the prince this prince raped Dinah, so Yaakov got very upset. He says, how can you do this? You're embarrassing me in front of all the people, and it's going to cause war. And Shimon and Levi responded, Hakezoyna yasas achisenu? Are you going to, our sister is going to be treated like a prostitute? She can just be raped and there's no consequences? So that clearly stated. He saw this Hasidic master saw that the Torah is clearly stating that all Yiddish tzaras come from the fact that there's some immorality. Because Jews are not, because of this intermingling, it's leading to a blurring of the boundaries between Jew and non-Jew. But the other Hasidic Rebbe pointed out, if you look in the Targum of Yonasan ben Azil, in the translation of Yonasan ben Azil, one of the greatest Tanoim that ever lived, the greatest student of Hillel. The Talmud said Hillel had 80 students, and Yonasan ben Azil was the holiest of them, and the greatest of them. Yochanan ben Zakkai was the least of them. And he was the leader of the Jewish people who saved the Jewish people during the destruction. And Yonasan ben Azil was the holiest and the greatest. So he translated the Torah into like a Targum, like Aramaic. And he writes over there, Shimon Velevi said, it's not nice that it should be said, B'knishtei in the Yisrael, in the gatherings of the Jewish people, that a non-Jew raped the Jewish girl. But he said, if you translate the words literally, it's not good, it's not good that people are speaking B'knishtei in Shal Yisrael in Jewish synagogues and gathering houses of Jews, that Jews get together in their gathering places. It's not it's not good that Jews are speaking. The Torah is saying both things are correct. And Alter Rebbe says here that he's basically clearly saying that all the tzaras, all the Yiddish tzaras that we're having is because we're not davening properly. Whereas if we would daven properly, that would lead to redemption. That would lead to personal redemption. Then Jews would be focused. Jews would be connected, consciously connected. This which will lead to personal change, personal redemption, which will lead to the ultimate redemption. So this would bless each and every Jew, bless them in the material welfare and well-being, because the stronger, the clearer the connection, the godliness and the connection, and the more vibrant and more powerful and more robust the neshama is, our godly soul is, this will lead and translate to physical well-being and will lead to the ultimate redemption. So this is the key thing. And that's why it's so difficult. That's why it's so challenging. That's why the Yetzer puts out all the stops, because he knows how critical it is. If Jews are really going to daven, then he's out of business. I think one of the Rebbe said, or one of the greatest Hasidim, I forget who said, that Satan would rather a person learn 8 pages of Gemara than 1 page of Likutei Torah and Torah, which is Alter Rebbe's Hasidic discourses on the Parsha and the holidays and Shir Hashir. He would rather you learn 8 pages of Likutei Torah than 1 page of Tanya, because 1 page of Tanya is so powerful. And he would rather you learn 1 page of Tanya than actually davening, because davening is so powerful. Davening is implementing everything that you learn and focusing. Because when you focus, then everything happens. Everything depends on that focus. You know, a person who's focused on himself gets very excited. When you insult him, he's very focused on himself. People are very focused. Hard-charging people are very focused on themselves. If anyone dares slights them or insults them, they're very focused on themselves. They get very, very excited. Let's say a person is fighting for his life, or is distracted with a very big project. He has a big project on his mind. And at that moment, he's not focused on himself. If someone will insult you, then I'm not focused. I don't get excited. I'm busy. Davening is a time when you're focused. You're focusing. You're centering yourself on your godliness, on your godly connection. When godliness becomes real to you. So all the learning in the world, if you're just learning information, if you're just learning the Torah and just learning a lot of information, that's not living it. In davening, I'm not learning new information. It's a time to live the information, to internalize it, to integrate it, where it comes to life and it becomes personal, it becomes real. That's what's impressive. That's where change happens. That's why it's so powerful, so potent, so central, so vital, and without that, it's so critical. And without that, all this tzaras happen. You're leaving a vacuum, you're leaving a void. So all the learning in the world can't replace the importance of davening. This is the moment of truth. To take all that learning and all that information, all that knowledge, and to internalize it, and to personalize it, and to make it come alive, and to make it real. It becomes a living Torah. It becomes godly Torah. So the Alter Rebbe is pleading. He says, Gewalt, Gewalt. Isn't it enough that we're 1700 years in exile? All the tzaras, and the tzaras keep on getting worse and worse and deepening. Isn't it enough that we should finally wake up and get our act together and start truly davening and start truly taking this seriously? This is for real. We're not playing games here. Every day we're davening, we're connecting and focusing. And can you imagine the power of 10 Jews daven like this and really daven together? The unity and the inspiration and the effectiveness and the power it would have and the change it would make in each individual's lives, with the improvement and the shifting and the change. And this would translate immediately and directly into physical well-being. It will also help us physically and materially. That's what you're davening for. You're davening, you're praying to Hashem. Also, the literal meaning of davening is you're praying to Hashem for all your needs. So this is the way to have your prayers answered, by truly focusing on Hashem. Fine. So Alter Rebbe, point number 1. He doesn't know what more to say or how you can say it. Even this is. Now he comes to point number 2.
Also, complete the study of the entire Talmud year after year, and in every community apportion the tractates by lot or by consent, each individual choosing the tractate that he desires to study. In a city with numerous synagogues, each congregation should complete the Talmud, and if the congregation is too small to implement this program, they should join forces with men of a larger one. This statute, if the entire Talmud be studied every year, shall not be varied or violated.
This is an enactment of the Alter Rebbe, brilliant, innovative, powerful enactment, which we do until today in Chabad. On Yutes Kislev, we finish the whole Shas, and we also start the whole Shas, the whole Talmud. Everyone takes at least one tractate, and together you divide all the tractates. So 63 tractates, you divide all the tractates, or there's 60, it depends how you count it, different ways of counting it. And so every year, annually, we finish the whole entire Talmud. This was enacted with Alter Rebbe at the end of 1787 or 1788. And there are many advantages of this enactment over if you're just learning by yourself. When you are part of this undertaking, and you take one tractate, and another Jew takes another tractate, and between all of you together, you finish the whole Shas. So it's as if you yourself had finished the whole Shas. As we find in the laws of Shabbos, that two people who do a work, but if each one can do it on his own, and if two people do it together, then you haven't violated, biblically you haven't violated Shabbos. But if neither of them could do it on their own, let's say they're lifting up something, it's too heavy for one individual to lift up. You need two. So since they both need each other, they're both indispensable to each other, therefore it's considered as if they've both lifted and done the whole thing. Even though I only did 50% of it. The Torah says you're only obligated on a Shabbat if you do the whole entire work. That's why if two people could lift up, and they both lift up, neither of them violated the Shabbos because I only did 50%. But if neither of them could do it alone, They need each other. So even though practically I'm only doing 50%, I'm only lifting up 50% because I can't possibly lift up the whole thing. But since I can't do it without the other, it's as if I've done the whole thing. So to here, since it's not possible for us to finish Shas every year, we're not Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. Moshe Feinstein will make it see him in Shas every year. I'm sure the Rebbe would also finish Shas every year. He would wake up every morning and go through six pages of Shas every day, every morning. And he finished the whole Shas every year. But since we are not capable of doing the whole Shas every year, it's only when I combine my efforts with my fellow Jew, so me learning my Masechta and the other Jew learning his Masechta, so therefore it's as if I've learned the whole entire Shas. So I made a siyum, not just I made a siyum on one tractate. Every year I'm making a siyum on the whole entire Shas, which is more than just a collection of individual tractates. When you finish the Shas, it's a very powerful thing. It's like a minyan is not just a collection of 10 individual Jews. You create a new collective entity, a new energy. When you finish the whole entire Shas, it's a special energy. So I have the energy every year of finishing the whole entire Shas. Not like Daf Yomi, I don't have to wait 7 years. Every single year, I have the energy of finishing the whole entire Shas. And in addition to that, adds, when you learn together, collectively, between each and all of you, you're finishing the whole entire Shas together, the whole entire Talmud. You have the advantage of studying Torah in public. It's as if I'm learning with 10 other Jews. As we learned in the letter, in the fourth part of the Tanya, the Holy Letters, 23, the advantage of 10 Jews learning together versus the individual learning alone. So here, when I'm studying my tractate, the other Jew is studying his tractate, and there are 63 Jews, each one of them studying their tractate, and together we're working on this project, together we're finishing the whole entire Shas. It's as if I am learning, I'm not just learning myself, all the other Jews are participating in my learning, and I'm participating in their learning. So you have the advantage of a minyan, and more than a minyan, 6 minyanim, or over 6 minyanim learning together. So every time I'm learning privately, I'm not learning alone, there are 60 Jews who are considered as if they're learning with me. So you have the advantage of studying Torah b'tzibur in the congregation. It's a powerful, powerful advantage. So this is one of the ingenious inventions of the Alter Rebbe, enactments of the Alter Rebbe, which is very strictly held till today in Chabad. At least everyone takes upon himself at least one tractate. Whatever you're learning on your own, even on your own you're learning many tractates, but at least one tractate to participate in this collective learning, which has so many advantages. Firstly, I'm helping another Jew. By me learning Maya and him learning his, I'm helping him finish Shas, and I am finishing the whole Shas. And that's the simple reason why Chabad never officially adopted the Daf Yomi, because Alter Rebbe already made a program that's powerful. The idea that every day you have to study, every Jew has to study a page of Talmud, a whole blot of Talmud, that goes without saying. Any Jew, especially a yeshiva student, went to yeshiva, of course, a day can't go by that you don't study a page of Talmud. And that has always been true. That's not the big innovation. And every day, Shabbos, Yom Tov, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. They once looked into the Tzemach Tzedek's room, the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. After Simchas Torah, he was dancing the night away, Simchas Torah, a lot of L'chaim. And when they peeked into his room, what was he doing when he finished Hakafas and Simchas Torah? They looked into his room, he took out a Gemara, and he was learning Gemara. So the idea that a day doesn't go by, that a Jew doesn't study a Blat Gemara, that goes without saying. But the innovation of the Alter Rebbe was the advantage that every year it's as if you finish the whole entire Shas. So over 7 years you finish the Shas 7 times by participating with another Jew. But the Alter Rebbe adds one thing, okay, in addition.
In addition, each of the participants shall individually read the whole of the 8-fold Psalm 119 every week.
In other words, everyone who's participating in this project And the Alter Rebbe, the first letter of Igeres HaKodesh, the first letter in the Holy Letters, the Alter Rebbe writes, Poischem bebracha. He's giving thanks that his enactment has been accepted and received. And after that first year, it was the first annual Siyum HaShas, every community finished the whole Shas. And it has never stopped ever since. So Alter Rebbe was giving a special thanks that his enactment, his idea has been implemented and accepted. But he's saying that everyone who's going to participate in this project, everyone who's going to accept upon themselves to study an entire tractate through this year, this annual cycle, and by Hasidim it was actually Yutas Kislev. And the Rebbe would make a siyum, and he would ask everyone in the audience, did you finish your tractate? Did you finish your tractate? Because it has to be for real. You have to finish the whole Shas. Everyone is dependent on you. If someone missed 5 pages, you deprived everyone. You messed up everyone. And there were many times when one person admitted, he was honest, he says, I missed a few pages. And on the spot, the Rebbe would learn. This was when the Rebbe was in New York already, when he came to New York in 1941. So every Yutas Kislev would make a Siyum HaShas. And so the Rebbe would, did you miss any pages? And he would, on the spot, he would quickly learn and make up those pages so you can make the whole Siyum and the whole Shas. So the Alter Rebbe says, everyone who's participating in this project, who takes upon themselves to learn the tractate, and is going to learn the tractate, I'm asking one thing of them, that every week they should say the whole Psalm 119, which is the longest Psalm in the whole Tehillim, the whole book of Psalms. It has 176 verses. It has the 22 letters of the Aleph Beis, and every letter is repeated 8 times, 8 verses for every letter. As the Gemara says, called Tmani Api, 8 letters of the Aleph Beis. So the Alter Rebbe says that whoever takes upon himself this enactment should also every week should say the whole Psalm 119. Which is why, he doesn't explain why. What's the connection? If I'm learning a tractate, and I'm going to finish a tractate over the year, and I'm participating in finishing the whole entire Shas every year, why is it important for me to say Kapitel Kuf Yutes every single week? So the previous Rebbe comments.
The previous Rebbe comments on the connection between completing the study of the Talmud and the recitation of Psalms as follows. From here we see that the study of Gemara is complete only when it is accompanied by the recitation of Tehillim, and in order to recite Tehillim properly, one needs to study Gemara.
So the two go hand in hand. Studying Talmud and studying the Gemara, in order to study the Gemara properly, you have to say a kapitel Tehillim. Because it's not just a matter of brilliance and legalese and law, but studying Torah, the Talmud, it's divine, it's godly. You're studying Hashem Torah. So you have to approach it with a sense of humility, a sense of holiness, a sense of sacredness. And in order to study Torah properly, to study Talmud properly, you have to say a kapitel Tehillim. You have to pray to Hashem and beg Hashem to connect with Hashem. It's easier to connect with Hashem when you're saying Tehillim, because you're praying. It's you're saying it with fervor. It's more of a spiritual experience. You're saying the words. You're saying Hashem's name. In Torah, you can get lost in the scholarliness of the Torah and the brilliance, and you get so caught up that you forget for a moment that it's divine. You're studying the infinite. You're studying Hashem's mind. You're studying something that's godly. That's really, the truth is, just like you don't understand the Tehillim, the truth is you really don't understand the Gemara either. It's a very superficial understanding. There's so much infinite depth in every word and every page in the Talmud and every word. It's Hashem's Torah. So to approach the Torah properly, it has to be combined with the Tehillim. But the Rebbe once commented and says, it's very interesting. He never saw anyone do this. We follow the enactment of the Alter Rebbe. We take upon ourselves to tractate every single year, every Chabad community around the world. And he never saw anyone, which means he never even saw the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe say chapter 119 every single week. The Rebbe said once, he remembered his father always used to say on Shabbos after Mincha. But that was more for Kabbalistic reasons. Not because to fulfill what Alter Rebbe says here. It seems like Kabbalistically you would say, so why, if this is the explicit wish of the Alter Rebbe, and we take every word of the Alter Rebbe seriously, and his enactment of studying, finishing the whole Shas, every community, every shul should take upon themselves, finish the whole Shas every year. Why wouldn't we take upon ourselves to say Kapitel 119 every week? So the Rebbe, I don't know if he answered this explicitly, but he spoke about in the later years. He quoted the Marsha, a very interesting Marsha, in the Tractate Saita. The Tractate Saita says that a person, there's a whole page, a page and a half, that discusses arrogance, how Hashem despises arrogance. You could be a Torah scholar, you could be religious, but if you're arrogant and you're full of yourself and you're so egotistical, and Hashem despises you. The wicked person, Hashem says, I can live with evil. Doesn't bother, I don't despise it. I can live with sinners. Even if you sin, I'm still with you. But if there's a person who's arrogant, even though he has no sin, Hashem says, I despise this person. Talmud says he won't have a share in the resurrection, he won't be resurrected. He's dead to Hashem, he's finished. But then the Talmud says that a Talmud Chacham has to have 1/64th of a little ego. 1/64th of ego, a little tiny drop. 8 times 8, Shemini Shebeshminis. The Vilna Gaon used to say that 8 times 8 is the 8th parsha, it's Vayishlach, and the 8th pasuk of Vayishlach is Katointi Mikol HaChasadim. Yaakov says, I am humbled and I am small. So Talmud is hinting, even the 8 times 8, 8th of 8, also you should be humble. But a person has to have a little ego, because if the Torah scholar won't have any ego, people will just trample over him. He has to carry himself with dignity, so he has to have a little 1/64. So the Marsha says, why does he say an 1/8 of an 8th, like 8 times 8? So he says it's referring to the 119th Psalm, which is broken down into 8 verses. Every Aleph Beit, every letter of the Aleph Beit, Tmana Api, has 8 verses. Every single verse discusses the quality, the advantage of studying Torah. Every verse it refers to the Torah, Veisecha, your testimonials, your mitzvahs, your chukim. Every single verse of those 176 verses discusses the Torah, the advantages of Torah. So he's saying a Torah scholar has to have 1/64th of a little gaiva, a little, ego. But he says, why 64? 64 minus 1 is 63. 63 is gas. Gas. Gas means arrogant. Gas haruach. So he's saying you can't have 1/63rd of gaiva, because that's gas. That will make you into an arrogant. You have to have 1/64th. In other words, a person who is learning Torah and has all the advantages of Torah and can get to your head, because you really have what to boast about, you really have what to brag about, you really have what to feel arrogant about. Look, I have real wealth, real riches. This is the true Forbes 400 list. I know Torah, I have something that's really valuable and precious and infinite value. It can turn you into a gas, it can turn you into something arrogance. So he says, 8 times 8, make sure that the Torah that you learn shouldn't lead you to arrogance. So that's what the 119th kapitel is. The Alter Rebbe says, you're learning a whole tractate. You're going to finish a whole tractate every year. And I just explained to you, by you finishing your whole tractate and you participating in this collective effort, it's as if you finished the whole entire Shas. The Shas is made up of 63 Masechtas, which can lead you to gas. You can become arrogant, insufferable, egotistical. So that's why when you say the kapitel 119, which is 8 psuk, and it talks about the holiness of Torah and greatness of Torah, how holy the Torah is, that will make sure that you'll only become 8 times 8, 64th. A little 64th, you'll never reach the gas, you'll never reach a 63rd, you'll never reach of arrogance. So based on this, someone is saying, you can explain why today we don't fulfill this wish of the Alter Rebbe. Because by studying Hasidus, don't forget the Alter Rebbe wrote this before the Tanya was even published. There was no real Hasidic books. I don't even know if the Tzavos Rivash was published yet in 1787 or 88. It could even be that there was not a single Hasidic book published yet at that time. So if you don't have Hasidus, what's going to hold your arrogance in check? What's going to keep your ego in check? Well, there was a say Tehillim, daven to Hashem, connect with Hashem, be humble. So you should never lead the gas. You should never lead just because you're finishing the whole Shas, all 63 tractates. You shouldn't get to your head and you feel so arrogant and shouldn't be puffed up and impossible and insufferable. So you say Tehillim, but now that we have the Tanya and we have Likutei Torah and we have Chassidus and we have Svarim, and of course every week, of course a Jew studies at least an hour of Chassidus or more. So that accomplishes the same goal. That's what keeps your ego in check. That keeps your arrogance in check. That doesn't get to your head. So you can study the Talmud and you remember about godliness and you remember about Hashem and you remember about the infinity of the Torah and the infinite preciousness and value of Torah and the humbling experience that it has on you. So you can study Talmud and it won't have any negative effect on you. So it does seem that must be the explanation, because otherwise it makes no sense. How could the Alter Rebbe make such a wish and it's not fulfilled? Why? Because we're afraid to say this kapitel Tehillim. First, you can break it up. There are some who break up, who say you should say this kapitel every week, and they break it up in 7 parts. So what's so terrible? Shabbos, you have a little more time, maybe you can say a little more. It's not so terrible. If you say it every week, you learn it by heart, so it's not a big deal. But since there's a reason why the Alter Rebbe is saying. The Rebbe is saying he's connecting it to studying the Talmud, as the previous Rebbe explains. Because it's not enough to study Talmud properly and the way it should be, in the proper way. You need Tehillim. Has to be connected with Tehillim. And in order to daven the proper way, you have to be a scholar. You have to know Talmud. To be a chassid, especially to be a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, it's not enough just to study Hasidus. You have to be a scholar. You have to study Talmud. You have to know halacha. The same Alter Rebbe who wrote the Tanya, wrote the Code of Jewish Law. And it's in his name, Shnei Ur. Shnei Ur is Shnei Ur, the 2 lights, the light of the revealed part of the Torah and the light of the secrets of the Torah, the secrets of secrets, Hasidus. And Alter Rebbe innovated and wrote and mastered both of them. And he wanted his Hasidim to be a Lubavitcher Chassid, to be a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe. You have to be a scholar, you have to learn the Talmud, and you have to study at least 1 tractate every single year, and you have to know halacha, as we're going to learn soon. And the next week, when we conclude the whole entire Tanya, and so they have to go hand in hand. The Tehillim, and the Talmud, and the studying, the godliness, the davening, and the learning, and the Tillim, and studying Hasidus, and studying the revealed part of Torah, each one enhances the other, each one strengthens the other, each one, and together you have a package that's beautiful and wholesome. So that does seem to be a correct explanation why today we don't fulfill this directive of the Alter Rebbe. Because we are fulfilling it by studying Tanya and studying Hasidus.
This class is part of the Lessons in Tanya project. More classes available at lessonsintanya.com.